Hello, Garland Nixon here. And of course, all the power people are in Moscow. And we're going to talk to probably the most powerful one, Mark Sleboda. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Mark Sleboda, and here we have very near to a Victory Day. That's tomorrow, and we got lots going on in Moscow. Lots going on. Period. Mark, welcome back.
Garland, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. And for all of those who will be catching this out there past midnight, happy Victory Day.
Awesome. All right, let's get rolling. Let's start here. Before we get to Victory Day. Yemen seems to be, I think in Sana'a or whatever, they're having Victory Day also. Interesting. I'll say this. I do a lot of complaining about Donald Trump, but it seems to me that he looked at it and was like, I'll put it like this. I think it was connected that the day Trump said we're out, the next day they're like, oh yeah, by the way, another F-18 slipped over the side. Yeah, that's it. Slipped. I'm like, yeah. It seems to me that, I don't know, look, a lot of people believe that they all slipped over the side. I tend to think maybe the Houthis had a bit more of a hand in it than that, but maybe I'm wrong. Your thoughts on the U.S. telling us they were going to crush the Ansar Allah like a flea, and after a month or so of doing battle with Ansar Allah, they declared victory and left. We won.
Yeah. Yeah, so Trump claimed that our Ansar movement in Yemen, right, effectively the government of Yemen, the Houthis, as they're referred to in the Western media, they capitulated. Evidently, he says they called him up and said, "Yeah, please don't bomb us anymore. We give up, and we're not going to bother Israeli." Allied and linked shipping moving through the Red Sea anymore, and that's it. We're done. We tap out, please. Yeah, right. And he says, yeah. I decided to stop bombing them. Suspiciously, this came right after the U.S. lost their second F-18 inside of a week, and I think I've lost the number of Reaper drones they've lost at a tune of $30 million a piece is somewhere in the mid-20s, I think. But this is all extremely suspicious. He was asked, who told you this? And he says, I have it on good sources. Until I hear something from our Ansar that supports that statement, I'm extremely suspicious. Now, it's true that the U.S. has been pummeling Yemen pretty heavily, and Israel as well. But just in the last few days, Yemen hit an airport in Israel with a ballistic missile, and Israel responded with heavy airstrikes at the airport in Sana'a, in the capital. And again, take it with a grain of salt, but they said that the airport was completely destroyed and out of function as a result of those Israeli counterstrikes. I remain suspicious that the Houthis would ever surrender at all. I mean, these guys are like the friggin' Fremen from Dune, okay? They endured years of U.S.-backed Saudi and GCC airstrikes for years, right? And they hardly batted an eye. So I'm extremely suspicious of this, and I consider it, fake news. But more than that, I mean, to claim, if it's not true, and I don't believe it is, but we'll see, If it's not true, then to claim that the other side capitulates as you run away, you sorry bag of feces. Oh my God. That's just the most pathetic thing. I mean, that's it. I mean, his presidency is over. I mean, if next week, sometime in the next week, the Houthis hit another ship moving through the Red Sea, or even try to hit another ship in the Red Sea, that should be it. I mean, Trump has not only has zero credibility, but tucked his tail between his legs and ran away. Now, I think we've talked before about how really just how fruitless, how futile, what a waste of critical air defense missiles and strike missiles playing whack-a-mole against the Houthis, right, in the deserts of Yemen is. They know how to avoid strikes, right? They have underground networks of tunnels, right? Yeah, you can take out some of them, but once our Ansala, the Houthi movement, came out as the only country taking military action in response to the Israeli ongoing ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Palestinians, which is set to escalate because the Israelis are outright saying now that they are going to reinvade and destroy Gaza and just get rid of all the people. I mean, they're just outright saying it. I mean, Trump gave them a green light to do it and said he would, consider it a real estate development and then turn it into a resort. All right, Gaza. That's the way it was termed. But once our Ansala, already a year ago, more than a year ago, began fighting back against Israel, against the United States, against Europe, right, against the Great Satan. All as they talk about the collective West. Recruitment for the Ar Ansala has gone through the roof. I mean, they have more support than they've ever had before, not less, right? U.S. airstrikes have not broken the will of the people of Yemen, at least not as far as I have any indication of. I would consider it very unlikely. And I thought it was great personally, because I know that the U.S. has a critical shortage of air defense missiles and is running very low on strike missiles too. And if they want to waste them playing whack-a-mole in Yemen, that makes them that much less likely to go to war with Iran or to, engage in a direct and open conflict with Russia in Ukraine, and puts back plans for any military action against China in Taiwan in the South China Sea for years, right? I mean, this is just a complete waste. They do not achieve anything, and this has been admitted before. I mean, the Biden administration played the same goal and then admitted that it hadn't had any effect, right? Biden himself said that, right? He said, "Yeah, well, it hasn't really done anything, but we're demonstrating strength." Really? Is that what you're doing? Because I could have sworn I had a different interpretation of that. So it is not a surprise. Now, it is entirely possible that the F-18s were lost when the aircraft carrier had to make sharp, sudden maneuvers because being struck, right? If they're conducting airstrikes and they've got these things, landing on the carrier, right? And then, being refueled, rearmed, repiloted, taking off again, right? These are very intensive, time intensive, and very dangerous operations on the deck of an aircraft carrier. I mean, accidents happen in peacetime all the time, with this. It is not a thing. And if they're taking evasive actions, and their air defense begins to operate against Houthi drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. It is entirely possible that yes, planes, that were in the process of being sent out to strike or returning can not be secured properly to the deck, and it is entirely possible for that to happen. It is possible that something else has happened involving Houthi attacks. Unfortunately, I would say the Western press, but also the world press, seems to have very few people on the ground in Yemen reporting on the Houthi side of the story. I personally, I think that this is a shall we say, a problem with the Russian press too. Why don't they have someone on the ground in Sana'a? Why aren't they getting statements? Why aren't we getting the Houthi version of all of these events? Or from the Yemenis people on the ground in the cities. Or I mean, maybe we are, but I certainly haven't seen it. And maybe the fault is mine then. But regardless, it is not penetrating the dominant narrative at all. It's almost as if the Houthis aren't even people. Well, I mean, we know Trump doesn't consider them beautiful people because he keeps talking about how important it is to save the beautiful people from being killed, the beautiful people being Russians and Ukrainians. And I happen to agree with him on that. But, I also consider the people of Yemen to be both human and in their own way beautiful too. Obviously, Donald Trump does not. So it really irks me whenever we get some type of Trump fanboy that still tries to present this man as a peacemaker. Oh, he's not a warmonger. He never went to war. They've just bombed Yemen, more than 1,000 airstrikes. Get real. Get over yourself, right? Stop drinking. I don't know. Does Trump do Kool-Aid? I don't know what else. Maybe
I guess Trump flavored Kool. I guess it's orange, right? It's Trump flavored Kool-Aid.
No, I would say gold. Maybe
right.
Gold Flex or something like that. I don't know, but it's time for those who are still hoping against hope to start to be critical of Donald Trump 2.0, because he's following down the same path of warmongering in the Middle East, and looks set to return to a policy agenda of let's call it Brandon 2.0 in Ukraine, because that's where everything looks like it's going. So until we hear something from the Houthis specifically about this claim that they've capitulated, my gut reaction is that it's the United States that has capitulated, or at least turned tail and run. And I guess we'll find out in the coming future. But I sincerely doubt that Donald Trump has broken the spirit of the Yemenis people. When Biden or anyway, Blinken and Sullivan did the same thing for months of the last a year of the last administration, and didn't get any results from it either. Neither did years of Saudi pummeling Yemen. So
yeah. I'm with you. I think they just the old claim victory and leave. They cried uncle, and now we're going to get the hell out of there as quick as we can.
There is another possibility that is more frightening, even disheartening, that they are preparing for military operation against Iran, and they want that air carrier positioned where it could be used against Iran as well. That is another factor to consider.
Well, I am on record as saying I don't think they attack Iran. I'm on record. Could be wrong at this point. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
I have been operating under the assumption that they would not, that it is not a war that they're looking for, that they've got other priorities, that they've got too much of a shortage of air defense missiles to defend Israel and all the U.S. bases in the region from the hailstorm of long-range missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, supposedly hypersonic missiles, drones that Iran has demonstrated several times now that they can unleash on Israel, on the region. So I was extremely skeptical of that. But Trump's the demands, the escalating demands, all of a sudden that have completely broken any negotiation process with Iran, as far as I can see, demanding that Iran give up their entire civilian nuclear power program, which is something that they are entitled to under international law and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? Not just you can't enrich uranium past a certain point, or you have to have inspections of your facilities. That's it. Trump is demanding no nuclear enrichment whatsoever, no nuclear program, right? Your Russian-built nuclear reactors at Bushehr, you have to shut them down. I mean, that's what. And the other is that Iran has to stop all support for military, financial, for Shiite groups throughout the Middle East, for the axis of resistance, including the Houthis, Hezbollah, Kataib Hezbollah, etc. Because the U.S. is allowed to have proxies, and they're allowed to arm them, right? Ukraine, Taiwan, right? So forth. But Iran, they're not allowed to do that. Right, that's the rules of the game, at least as far as the U.S. sees them. These demands are absurd, right? They are no country that is a regional power like Iran with a sovereign and independent foreign policy would accept those kind of diktats. They can't, right? They don't want to, and they can't. So there's two choices here. Either this is more bluff and bluster and Trump will back down like he did with his tariff war on the world, or they're really looking for war now. And the we want war with Iran on behalf of Israel faction within the administration is in the ascendancy. And it has to be said, that's a pretty big faction within Trump's government, right? I don't know how else to read those escalating demands. I thought we were, 2 weeks ago, I thought we were going to get off with, negotiations. They were talking some face-saving JCPOA 2.0 rebranded with tacky Trump gold lame or something like that. That's where I thought things were headed. Trump claims it's better for them. Iran claims it's better for them, and everyone goes back and avoids a war that the last few years, right, of the Biden administration, the Blinken-Sullivan administration, both Iran and the U.S. went out of their way, like crazy out of their way, right, agreeing on pantomime military actions on both sides to avoid that conflict, which the only one who wanted it was Netanyahu. Well, Netanyahu hasn't stopped wanting it. But my assumption is that the Trump team had told Netanyahu, like, you can do whatever you want to the Palestinians and we'll just, ignore or help or whatever. But we're not going to go to war with Iran with you. That was my assumption. But the absurd escalating demands that have once again, proven how, diplomatically either incapable or incompetent the Trump administration is. I don't know how to read that otherwise, right? Either they're going to back down and this is going to be another back down for the Trump administration, or they're really looking for war, because there's no way Iran can agree to those demands. So my gut instinct is that the U.S. doesn't want this war, at least not here, not now, not this administration, not with the Achilles heel of the shortage of air defense missiles. They're not prepared for, when they would rather be, they're more worried about China or Russia and Ukraine and that sort of thing. But again, these demands, I'm still trying to decide how to read them. They weren't Trump's team's initial demands when they went into negotiations with Iran. As far as we know, both sides gave no indication that was. This is something that has come up in the last week, really, right? And it has completely, of course, stopped the negotiations and raised, the specter, the big question mark. Are they really looking for a war, making demands like this that
But
they should know that Iran can't agree to?
Well, here's the thing, Mark. The beauty of it is this: it changes every few hours. Literally. I look, JD Vance, well, I think we're getting close. Trump, yeah, I'm willing to listen to what they've got to say. Maybe they should have a nuclear program. A couple hours later, we'll stop them however we can. They can't have any nukes. A couple hours later, but I think we got to be reasonable with it. So it's like literally, if you watch Truth Social and go on, the various things and look, every 7 hours, they do a 180. They're ready to attack Iran. They're ready to be reasonable. They're listening to what Iran has to say. Then they go back to maximalists. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just see where this goes.
It's whiplash.
Exactly. You're like watching a ping pong game.
Quixotic and mercurial does not begin to do justice, right? They're obviously a clown show. They have no idea what they're doing. They're going back and forth. Trump changes his mind according to whoever he talked to in the last 15 minutes that flattered him or convinced, presented him with an argument that he bought into, at least until the next person he talks to. And Putin actually warned about this, right? He warned that, well, Russia would actually probably prefer Biden or Kamala Harris because it's predictable, because Trump is unpredictable. And everyone thought he was joking when he said that, right? And I'm like, no, you don't understand how important when you're dealing with two nuclear armed states, right? Predictability is extremely desirable and important. Right, the Trump administration, the Putin team, they could forecast with very good reliability, what a Biden-Harris team would do at any point. Trump, who knows? One day Zelensky is a dictator, and I'm like, oh my God! He said that he's a dictator. He admitted it. You can't just, that's done, right? And then next week, did I say that? That doesn't sound like something I'd say, and everyone forgets about it, right? No one calls on it. So, it's worse than dealing with an emperor with no clothes. We're also dealing with an emperor with no attention span and attention deficit disorder. That's what we're dealing with here. So you're right. It makes our job very fucking difficult.
But kind of fun at times. Okay, let's go. Now let's move on. Victory Day. Xi, initially what I thought was, okay, Xi's going to fly into Moscow. They'll play patriotic songs. People will shake hands. They'll fly the flags. It'll be real cool ceremonies. It's always cool where like he and Putin walk down these long red carpets and shake hands and all the pomp and circumstance. I think that's so cool. And then ultimately they'll stand out, they'll wave, and then they'll go home. It seems to me they're actually it's shall we say, a working vacation. They're signing all kinds of stuff. There's
4 days. He's here for 4 days. That for a leader of a country, right, as big and, with as much going on as China, to spend 4 days in another country. That's really kind of unheard of. That's huge. That's a long time. They're going to be doing a lot of economic and of course strategic deals. I'm sure they'll be talking and putting out a joint position on the India-Pakistan tensions.
Oh yes.
But of course, the Victory Day celebrations is sacred, right? It's sacred in general, but particularly for Russia and China. they are the one and the first and the second country that suffered the most in terms of civilian and military losses and destruction of their own countries, right, in World War II. I mean, Russia lost some 20 to 30 million people. For those of you who got your fan fiction interpretation of World War II history from Hollywood and Saving Private Ryan or Trump's social media posts, because he just claimed that the U.S. played the biggest share. Academics, actual Western academics, admit that some 83% of German troops died on the Eastern Front. 83%. And when we're talking the 700,000 plus European fascist allies of Hitler, most of them died on the Eastern. I mean, like more than that, right? Like almost the entirety of them, except maybe for the Italians. But even in the Italians' case, they sent large numbers of troops that died on the Eastern Front, right? So, Russia paid the biggest price in the defeat of Nazi Germany. It was them who raised the flag over the Reichstag in Berlin, but they paid the price, but they also did the lion's shares of the killing, right? Of the actual combat and the defeat. And the second front was opened very late in the game by the U.S. and the United Kingdom and assorted others. Basically, let's have a frank moment of honesty. When they were afraid that the Soviet Union was going to be the one to liberate and then occupy all of Europe, all of continental Europe, that's when they went into the game. So that the entirety. And we've got these opinion polls that show how distorted the Western fan fiction narrative of World War II history has become. I've seen these polls out there asking, taking a look at what people in the countries involved said at the time, who was the one most responsible for the defeat of Nazi Germany, right? And now, and I've seen numbers. For the French, it was something like almost 90% at the time, right? In the immediate aftermath of World War II, we're quite clear that it was the Soviet Union that did the lion's share of the work. And now it's like in the low teens, right? Obviously, you can call it distortion of history. It's not forgotten. That's too passive. There has been a deliberate, intentional, malicious rewriting of history in line with the geopolitical demonization of first the Soviet Union, then Russia, but now also China as well, with China's role in the East against Japan being completely forgotten as well. And it has to be said, the Soviet Union also delivered powerful blows against the Japanese in Manchuria and elsewhere. Many credit that actually with bringing the Japanese to unconditional surrender, even more than the atomic bombs. That's a contentious point, though, right? Among historians who discuss it. But regardless, this is a sacred memory for both countries, and this is an important date, right? First of all, the 80th anniversary, right? A big round number. There's not many living World War II veterans left, right? And the next big ordinal, number to come up, there may not be any left. Years ago, my wife and I used to go every Victory Day to Victory Park in Moscow. Victory Park is a historical memorial park on the outskirts of Moscow. They have a huge amount of equipment, military equipment from all sides, laid out. They have trench networks you can operate through. You can move through, see what it was like. They have a great, wonderful museum with all kinds of high tech shows and projections. They've got often at times they've got kind of like military soup kitchens. You can sample the food that the troops ate on the front. Historical recreationists there all the time. So it's a big, huge park, lots of monuments. It's a beautiful, but also somber place. And we would go there every Victory Day, and we would follow a Soviet and Russian tradition of handing out red flowers to the veterans when we saw them. And at the time, there were still, quite a few veterans, not only from Moscow and Russia, but they would come on Victory Day from all across the former Soviet Union. I remember, just immediately when I think of those days, I remember one conversation we had. We sat down and talked to an old, a grandfather, dedushka, veteran from Turkmenistan. He flew all the way from Turkmenistan to celebrate Victory Day in Moscow. And, he's walking around with his medals, right? With this big, long beard and, a turban. And, it was just absolutely fascinating to me, the way that the memory of the Soviet people who fought together in that conflict was. So, we stopped doing that a few years ago, basically because there's no veterans anymore, right? Those that are still alive are too not well enough to go out and walk in big open places that require lots of walking like that. It's very sad, of course. And that's one of the reasons why Russia has added not just the big state military parades to Victory Day, but what is the Immortal Regiments March. This is a something that grassroots thing that came out of the people and has been adopted not just nationally, but increasingly all across the world. Right, wherever it's allowed. I know in some places in the West it's not allowed anymore. Evidently, in the U.S. it's being allowed. They got a permit in Washington D.C., I guess, for the first time in years. But
I think there'll be goose stepping in Kiev.
yeah, people who lost loved ones, right, in the war, or in whatever capacity, or remembering, they march through the streets in huge numbers, millions of people holding up photos or paintings of their loved ones or people, they think are important to remember. And it has a very specific kind of feel. It's almost like icons, right? Which is a big part of the Orthodox faith. So it's very powerful. Putin himself participated several times in the Immortal Regiment March, carrying a picture himself of his own family that served and died in World War II. And this is so that even when they are gone, they are not forgotten. And I think that very likely at the end of this conflict, the veterans of this conflict will be immortalized yearly like that as well, right? I think we'll maybe it'll be a separate day, maybe it'll be the same day. There's a lot of Russians who feel basically that this is finishing the job that wasn't finished in World War II.
Yeah, I've said it. I've talked about that. It's like, how do you define the end of something? You know what I mean? How do you define the date that it ends? You can arbitrarily define it, but there's people still goose stepping around. Look at they got Kaja Kallas and von der Leyen and all these people who in charge now, whose grandfather was fighting the Russians on the Nazis. So really, they haven't finished the Nazis off. And they're still stuck around and they're rearing their ugly little heads again. So, you got to clean up the trash every now and then. And I think that's what it is. They're sweeping the trash up right now from World War II that was left over.
Yeah, the Banderites, right? I mean, that's in Ukraine, but increasingly, the Nazis and Nazi collaborators and their grandchildren in Canada, Freeland and von der Leyen and others. Germany banned the public presentation of the Soviet flag on Victory Day in Germany. And they said that could be construed as sympathy for Russia in the current conflict in Ukraine. I got another take. I would say that banning the Soviet flag is sympathy for your Nazi forefathers.
How about that?
Their modern Nazi collaborator reincarnation or regeneration in Ukraine, right? Within the Kiev regime, the Banderite fascism that suffuses that. All of this makes dealing with the issue of Russia's celebration of Victory Day, in Ukraine, in Kiev, right, but also across Europe, it makes it a bit awkward. Bit awkward. How do you say, yeah, we don't like the Soviets, we didn't like them defeating Nazi Germany because we were supporting fascists today? I mean, that's what it is, right? I've seen videos, several of them in the last few years, of Ukrainian veterans of the Red Army in Kiev and elsewhere in Ukraine who are forbidden from coming out on Victory Day, wearing the St. George ribbon of memory of the defeat of Nazi Germany, or the Soviet flag, or even the uniforms they wore at the time. That's all forbidden now. And I remember seeing one extremely elderly, legless vet talk about how he was injured like 6 or 7 times and kept coming back, and he's explaining to this police officer who's telling him, you can't wear those medals, right? You can't be here today, you wearing those in public. And he's like, I was injured this, I was injured here, I lost my leg here. And he said, what did I fight for when you're telling me that I can't remember that today? Right. And the cop, to his credit, was obviously extremely uncomfortable and embarrassed with, the task he was being assigned to do. He was kept rubbing his face and trying not to look at the camera and everything. But, this is the conflict that's going on within Ukraine today, right? There is the dominant, maybe not dominant numerically, but dominant politically faction, not just within the military, the battalions that have now become a part of the military, but within, the political sphere of the Kiev regime, in the Rada, in the intelligence services, everything, right? They worship the people who fought on the other side. Right, the Banderites, the followers of Stepan Bandera, the genocidal fascist ideologue and Nazi collaborator, and the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, which he led. That committed massacres of Poles, of Jews, of leftists, of ethnic Russians, of anyone and everyone, right, who wasn't a Ukrainian, an ethnic Ukrainian who didn't believe in Banderite fascism, right, who didn't believe with their conception of Ukraine. So ultimately, whatever their ethnicity, whatever whom these West Ukrainian nationalists, these Banderites killed, right, it wasn't Russians. They killed more Ukrainians, Polish Ukrainians, Jewish Ukrainians, Russian Ukrainians, leftist Ukrainians, right? Ukrainians. They killed Ukrainians left and right. And they're presented as some type of patriotic national symbol now. Well, maybe if your idea of Ukraine is of a vastly reduced political and ethnic polity than it is and has been. But it's just atrocious. It is a modern obscenity. It is a cancer that has reinfected Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union. It has to be said that a lot of these immigrants from the World War II came to the United States and Canada. They kept the belief in and the organization of Ukrainian nationalists and Ukrainian insurgent alive. They dominated U.S. and Canadian foreign policy towards the Soviet Union and then Russia, and they have been busy regrowing this ideology in Western Ukraine since 91, 92. And we see the results of that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Russia's just like got to extinguish it. I keep saying what they want to put the troops in for in the UK and France, mainly, they know they can't defeat Russia. They want to stop denazification. They know the war's lost. Their fear is, look, our Nazi group before, our Nazi proxy got the hell knocked out of it, and we only had a little bit, so we kind of hid it in Western Ukraine and nourished it and kept it healthy and gave it a bottle when it was hungry and burped it every now and then, right? Kept it going. And now the Russians are like, yeah, no, we got to finish this thing off. They're like, no, because what the hell? Where will we have our Nazis then? You're going to run them all out. And the Russians are like, yeah, I know. And so their big fear is that denazification will end this thing once and for all. And that's why the Russians are like, yeah, that's kind of the plan. And I think when it comes down to it, yeah, it's about a lot of things and all of that. But they're horrified that their Nazis will be extinguished once and for all, and that will end their diabolical plan to, because it's the same thing happening. We put a bunch of Nazis together, boom, a regime, there we can attack Russia. Russia smacks it down. Crap. Okay, we put another Nazi regime together. Now they're going to attack Russia, and Russia's like, yeah, we're going to smack this one down. This time we're going to finish it off. And they're like, no.
It's they don't want to lose their proxy regime. They've made great strides since 2014 in manufacturing, like in the artificial sense of the word, right? An anti-Russian Ukrainian state, of forcing this Banderite national identity conception of West Ukraine, forcing it, like literally physically, right, forcing it on the entirety of the country, and then weaponizing Ukraine against Russia. I mean, that has been the project since 2014. Yes, and they don't want to lose that. That's why, Trump's been quite open. He said, I want to save Ukraine, meaning he, not the Ukrainian as a whole, the nation, the people. He wants to save an anti-Russian Banderite regime in Kiev, because however much he doesn't much like Trump, however much Trump doesn't like personally Zelensky or the other members of the regime there, no matter how much he doesn't like the European leaders, across the board right now in Europe who support the Kiev regime in Ukraine. Now, however much he personally may not really give two flying figs about Ukraine, he is the U.S. president, and it is U.S. geopolitical interests to keep alive an anti-Russian, regime on Russia's border, right? And if they can continue, then they can continue educating future generations of Ukrainians, to be the West's warrior caste against Russia, politically and militarily. So that's what is on the cards, and that what they are trying to preserve there. They have made great strides in manufacturing this anti-Russian Ukraine, and they're just not willing to give it up easily. And the Trump administration is JD Vance just read an interview with him where he said that Russia is demanding too much to end the conflict in Ukraine. Yeah, because we won.
Yeah, exactly.
We're winning. You're losing, right? And this continual trying to present themselves as completely uninvolved and uninterested third-party mediators. No, we didn't just beat your proxies. We beat you too, right? And you'll either accept our terms or we'll continue. And your threats,
how about this, Mark?
sanctions.
How about this, Mark? Russia ain't asking. Russia's asking too much. Oh, no. Russia's not asking. This is not a request. This is not pretty please. Would you be so kind as to grant it? No! Russia's saying, it's up to you. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you give it to us now. The hard way is we take it ourselves. That's not a question or a request per se.
It's terms. It is terms. They set the terms. The U.S. doesn't set the terms. Not Trump. And if he's not willing to take Russia's terms, then it goes on until you're willing to, until the Kiev regime unconditionally surrenders, right? This former Gobelesque presidential advisor of Zelensky, who's now in exile in the United States, Alexei Arestovich, he pointed it out. He was doing another interview with one of the pro-Kiev regime bloggers, and they say, they're asking him, why should we accept, these 4 or 5 really, regions of becoming part of Russia? And he's like, because if you don't, then it's going to be 6 or 8, right? That's where it's going. Look at Russia right now is evidently making a small scale, but it could get larger scale contested crossings of the Dnieper, right? There are reports that they've the Dnieper River, that they've crossed it, and they're starting to take territory on the Kiev regime held bank of the river, in the direction of Kherson City. They are a scant 1.2 kilometers away from the border of the Donetsk border with Dnipropetrovsk region. They're moving into Sumy. They're building up forces around Chernigov. They're advancing within Kharkov region. Yeah, that the writing is on the wall here. You know how many Russian officials, including Patrushev, the former head of the Security Council, still a member of the Security Council, and one of Putin's closest confidants and advisors, him and several others have brought up Odessa in the past couple of weeks, and I'm pretty sure that the Kremlin is they're still willing, if they're given everything, or at least nearly everything they've asked in terms, they're still willing for a diplomatic settlement. But they've already got their eye on finishing this on the ground and forcing an unconditional surrender, and just not bothering with this diplomatic games and bumbling of the Trump administration. Just, this is what we're taking, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yes. Last item. I find this India-Pakistan thing interesting. You look at the history in Pakistan. Let's face it. Recently, Imran Khan, the government overthrew him, and we know the whole thing like that. He actually came out with a document that said, "Look at this. The United States was behind it," and they said, "Hey, you're divulging state secrets. You gotta go. You gotta go to jail." I'm like, yeah, that's kind of weird. But at any rate, and now there is a fracas, shall we call it, going on, a scrum at this point between India and Pakistan. Interesting Russia's position.
I think a bit more than that at this point.
I'm trying to use those words and hope
it's escalating pretty quickly.
Yeah, that it doesn't get. But Russia's position is very interesting. So anyway, through the eyes of Moscow, your take on the Kremlin's position, India, Pakistan.
Okay, so first of all, I think we really have to consider the incident that sparked all of this, and I think we, certainly in the current time, we can talk about that incident as the genesis. And this was a terrorist attack in Kashmir by the group that claimed credit for it, then retracted it, but everyone knows they did it, is the Resistance Front, which is just a sock puppet front for Lashkar-e-Taiba. Lashkar-e-Taiba is a Wahhabist, Salafist, jihadist terrorist organization. They were formed with money from Osama bin Laden in the 1980s, right? Their goal is not only to take Kashmir, right, the entirety of Kashmir, but they're quite open about this, then use Kashmir as a base of operations to reconquer India and force the entire Indian population to Islam, to their twisted interpretation of Islam, and reform the Mughal Empire. I mean, these are the nice chaps involved here. So anyone who wants to get on the national determination of Kashmir, no, these are the same type of ISIS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. These are the same type of loonies that have been fought all over the place. Now, they killed some 28 people in this attack, and it wasn't even a bombing. They came upon a party of mostly tourists, right, in a kind of a natural park area of Kashmir. And they lined them all up, and they tried to determine who was Islamic and who was not, right? And evidently they asked them to recite verses from the Quran. If they couldn't do that, well, then, they're not Muslim. They also evidently had the men all pull down their trousers to look for circumcision, right? And then all of the non-Muslim men, right, which were mostly Hindu and one Christian, they killed. They summarily executed. They shot them. This is, just killing of, what in Kashmir, I guess you can consider religious minorities, because they're not your interpretation. And actually, they also killed a Muslim man, evidently, who was with this tourist group. I think he was actually like a donkey driver, who tried to stop this insanity, got in the way and was killed as well. And so, I mean, this is a heinous terrorist attack. Lashkar-e-Taiba is recognized as a terrorist organization by India, by Russia, by the United States, by the United Kingdom, by the EU, by the UN, and by Pakistan. They're even recognized as a terrorist organization. But of course, it is, widely reported, and has been for years, that they're allowed to operate out of large swaths of Pakistani territory on the border, and provided, a great deal of assistance by Pakistani intelligence, and used to, as a weapon against India. Particularly in Kashmir. So, I mean, this just trying in any way to justify this or defend this, at all. India launched their response after almost 2 weeks, because this occurred in April 22nd. So they really took their time here and considered their options. And I would not be surprised if they didn't talk at least with Russia, and had Russia talk with China beforehand. They say that their response was proportional, non-escalatory, right? In line with international practices. They did not target any Pakistani military facilities. They only targeted the bases, the training camps, the headquarters of Lashkar-e-Taiba and another related group, Jaish-e-Mohammed, in Pakistan. And yes, they killed some civilians, because terrorists have families too, and they usually keep them with them, right? And yes, they hit a mosque compound that was being used by them as their base of operations. So, I until I see something to the contrary, some revelation, and I don't even see really Pakistan really, denying, what India hit that much. I think it was proportionate. I think India did what any country would do, right? I think that Pakistan, unless they want to openly support using Lashkar-e-Taiba and terrorist attacks, and want a war with India, then they should back down. And the truth is that Pakistan doesn't control about a third of their own territory, including the border areas where Lashkar-e-Taiba operates off. I got a better idea. Rather than escalating back against India, de-escalate and take control of your own goddamn country, right?
How about, let me ask you this. Did you hear, I've read this a lot, that Pakistan's military leadership said, well, if we get in a war, we really couldn't fight it but 4 days because we sent all of our shells, which means a hell of a lot of other stuff, to Ukraine. And I immediately thought, that's why they got rid of Imran Khan. They got rid of Imran Khan so they could say, all right, because they control the Pakistani leader. The guy was like living in a London suburb.
He was also set to sign major energy deals with Russia too, in defiance of Western sanctions. So that adds to it. Yeah. But so here's Euromaidan Press in the last week. Pakistan faces ammunition shortages amid tensions with India due to large underground exports to Ukraine, right? So they sent huge numbers of artillery shells, ammunition, and military equipment to the Kiev regime. When you think about what Russia has attrited its way through in the last 3 years, it's not just the Kiev regime. It's not just all the post-Soviet weapons left in now NATO countries that were transferred over. It's not just NATO's own weapons, but it's not just the major non-NATO Western, allies, South Korea, Japan, Israel, and others. They went to entirely third-party countries like Pakistan, like looting weapons from Syria after Turkish-backed Al-Qaeda seized power there, right? The entire world's worth of weapons that they could get, they have thrown against Russia in Ukraine, and it's still nowhere near enough, right, to keep up with Russian military industrial production. And yeah, there's a great deal of schadenfreude with Pakistan in this. The Pakistani ambassador was very desperately publicly pleading in Moscow in the last week, asking Russia to mediate between Pakistan and India. And I'm like, why is it that all of the rest of the world just assumes and expects Russia to be the adult in the room, right? No matter what you do, you transfer arms to Banderites, killing Russians in Ukraine. But here, please don't let India unleash on us and start a nuclear, potentially, start a nuclear conflict here. And of course, the thing is that Russia is the adult in the room. And they are going to almost certainly work with China to reduce tensions, to make sure that there isn't a major conflict in the subcontinent that has the potential, to go nuclear, because both Pakistan and India are nuclear armed countries. But yeah, there's not a lot of sympathy for Pakistan among, the Russian public, press, political class right now. I mean, India's been doing a lot of flirting with the U.S. and everything. Nothing, of course, on the scale with Pakistan, who openly overthrew their own prime minister, evidently on orders, or at least the go-ahead from the United States. But, India's been flirting with the U.S. too. And I've been extremely critical of India with a lot of that flirtation with the West. But in this particular situation, I think India did the adult in the room thing. Actually, I think their response was proportionate. I think it was reasonable, and I have very little sympathy for the Pakistani regime in this situation. If you want to, get behind defending terrorist trading camps on your territory, I'm sorry, I can't.
Well, another thing, I'll say one last thing here. One last thing I'll throw at you. Two things. I think this could be something to remind India who their friends are,
Yeah.
right? And I also think it could be an opportunity now that the India doesn't want a nuclear war either, and they don't. They have to respond, but they don't want. No, who wants it? India's trying to grow their economy, and they don't want to get involved in a nuclear war. They had to respond, but it could be an opportunity to remind them, hey, Russia's always there when you need them, and they always have been, and you need to make sure that you maintain that relationship. Number one. Number two, it could be an opportunity for Russia, who I know that they want to do this, for Russia to use this as a tool to help mitigate the friction between India and China. Since Russia's in the middle of this, kind of India, they could use this. They could bring China into, come on, guys, let's bury the hatchet. I think it's an opportunity. And that's why I think that Russia's diplomat, or, Lavrov, these people are brilliant. And rather than just say, doggone it, you aggravated us a couple of times and we'll fix you. I think they're going to look at the big picture and say, all right, now this is what we've been waiting for. We can now use this to India and China, sit down at this desk and let's shake some hands here.
Yeah, I think it is. It is an opportunity, right? That Russia and China and India can come together. And remember, both India and Pakistan are part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization now, right? And that could be a good format for working for some kind of settlement. I do, unfortunately, have to leave.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot, Mark Sleboda. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on the American oligarch Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1. You can also find me on Substack and/or Telegram at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
Thanks a lot. Take it easy. All right, everybody. That's it from Mark Sleboda. We certainly thank him for coming on. And you all, you see everything scrolling across. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms. Make sure you support any way you can. If you can buy me a coffee or Patreon or whatever, buy me a coffee is always great. Buy Garland a coffee. It's like $5 or something. However many you can do. And right there it says, just like Patreon, you can make it a monthly donation. How about that? If you can afford it. If not, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you do the important thing. You're part of alternative media. Everybody, all 1,165, you play an important part in social media. And here's your part. Share this on all your social media platforms. Like, subscribe, click the join button if you can join. I'm out.